There have been proposals made that the Palestinian flag would fly over City Hall in an act of solidarity with the people in Gaza. In a moment, we're going to be speaking to Councillor David McManus, Fine Gael councillor for Rathfarnham Templeogue. But before that, one of those in favour of the move is Councillor Noeleen Reilly, independent for Ballymun Finglas. Councillor Reilly, why do you want to see the flag flown?
I think it's just a small show of solidarity from Dublin City Council. It's not the first time that we have flown the Palestinian flag, and in particular what's going on over there at the moment with the mass slaughter of innocent men, women and children, that I think it's really important that we are out showing our solidarity for the Palestinian people and calling for a ceasefire and telling the world that, look, that this isn't acceptable, that Ireland is a small country, but we can play our part, and Dublin City can play our part in showing that we do not, we condemn what's going on over there at the moment.
In previous times when the Palestinian flag might have been flown, it was very clearly in support of the people in Palestine. Is there a risk in the current context that while that might be the intent, that it is read as an expression of support either for Hamas or as an expression for a lack of understanding of what was done to people in Israel in the Hamas attack?
No, I don't. And I think it's very important that we differentiate between the Palestinian people and Hamas. Like, this situation in Palestine didn't start 3 weeks ago. It's been going on for decades. And that is why Irish people, because we have our own history, and that is why we've always shown such solidarity with Palestine, that we want to fly this flag. And it is important that we're showing our support. There's innocent men, women and children being murdered every single day. And they have been allowed to do that and supported initially by some of the biggest powers in the world.
Interesting, a text arriving in saying things like only a flag for peace should be hung in Dublin. We shouldn't take sides. The situation is too complex. Another, the idea of flying a Palestinian flag is bizarre. Ireland takes pride in its neutrality. There are serious wrongs on both sides. Yet Ireland's response has been very partisan, with inappropriate language used by Irish politicians. We need to remain neutral and call on both sides to cease hostilities. Well, as I said, Councillor David McManus is with us. He's Fine Gael councillor for Rathfarnham Templeogue and South Dublin County Council. Councillor McManus, to that issue of our neutrality, is this one of those instances where even if we might believe, and even if the majority opinion might be with one side in a conflict, our neutrality is best served by simply flying a peace flag?
Yeah, firstly, I think we need to acknowledge that the Israel-Palestine conflict is one of the longest continuing conflicts around the world. The conflict is exceptionally complicated. For every claim by either side, there's another counterclaim. I don't believe, having seen everything in the last few weeks, that either side can claim any moral high ground right now. And I think we're all struggling to come to terms with what we're seeing on our TVs and social media. Both sides are fighting a propaganda battle as well as an armed conflict. We need to ask what we're trying to achieve by displaying one nation's flag on the buildings of our 4 local authorities across Dublin, especially at a time when this conflict has intensified in recent weeks, and we have to consider the consequences of such a move and how it can be interpreted or misinterpreted.
But Noeleen made the point at the outset about that important differentiation between Palestine and Hamas. They are not the same thing. Yeah,
and Ireland has a unique position and reputation around the world. We are recognised as a neutral, credible voice for peacekeeping, de-escalating conflict and promoting peace talks, given our own history of conflict in Northern Ireland. And when it came to our own conflict, to bring both sides to the table, the Irish government did not declare one side to be right and one side to be wrong. And that is my concern when you're raising the flag of one nation.
Well, we did when it came to Russia and Ukraine, and there was absolutely no issue with flying the Ukrainian flag. And many people would see what the Israeli army are doing as akin to what the Russians have done in Ukraine.
David?
Yeah, I do look at that slightly differently. You have 2 sovereign states, Russia and Ukraine. One invaded the other. Anyone that has eyes to see and ears that can listen
will know. That is what has happened in Palestine for decades. Their land has been stolen. Their homes has been stolen.
Well, can I put to you, Noeleen, a text that has come in that says, if we are going to wave the Palestinian flag...
It's the weekend. Your own party leader came out at the weekend and stated it was revenge.
Noeleen, hang on for a second. A text that says, if we are going to wave the Palestinian flag, we should also wave the Star of David in solidarity with the 1,500 Israelis murdered by Hamas on the 7th of October.
I don't agree with that. There's been over 10,000 people murdered in Palestine. And this didn't start, this is the important point, this didn't start on the 7th of October. It's going on for decades and has been allowed to go on for decades. And it will continue to go on for decades unless world leaders actually step in and demand a ceasefire.
And do you not think that it will be interpreted by civilians, whatever about the Israeli state, but civilians in Israel, were we to do it, as a gross disservice to those 1,500 people who were civilians who were massacred and captured on the 7th of October?
Like, I don't think there's anyone at all that would condone what happened on the 7th of October. It was barbaric. But again, I'll go that it didn't start then. And I'm absolutely sure that there is people that wouldn't appreciate what we're trying to do. But what we are here, we're trying to stop the massacre of innocent people on a daily basis. Like, we will all go home safe in our beds tonight. There will be people in Palestine who won't know if they'll wake up in the morning because of what the Israelis are doing.
In that context, Noeleen, does it make any difference whether we fly the flag or not, or what flag we fly?
It's a small show of solidarity, and I think it's important for the people of Palestine to see that there are countries behind them, there are people supporting them, and we do not support what's going on there. All of the main party leaders, including David's own, has come out and said he does not support what's going on there.
Well, David, what of that it harkens to the Edmund Burke quote about evil triumphing when good men do nothing?
That's why, Anton, it's very important that all political channels, they have to be managed carefully and navigated to try and bring about a peaceful resolution. The difficulty is running to the nearest flagpole and raising one flag will undermine our position as a credible voice for peace. And the focus should be on leveraging diplomatic channels for an urgent ceasefire by both sides and scaling up humanitarian access and supplies. The Irish government has been clear that international humanitarian law applies in all circumstances to both sides, to state and non-state actors. And in Ireland across the world has a unique position and reputation that we are recognised as a neutral, credible voice for peacekeeping, de-escalating conflict and bringing both sides to the table to try and get a peaceful resolution.
OK, I'm conscious Noeleen wants to come back in and I'll let her back in 1 second. Just on that, David, what is it about stating publicly that we support a population that is going through a humanitarian horror? What is it about stating that would preclude us being able to engage in diplomacy with or around the rest of the participants to this conflict?
Because flying one nation's flag above government buildings or local authority buildings, it is a very blunt instrument to indicate which side you're on. There's a need for nuance, there's a need for detail, and diplomacy is not always or only about friendly relations or an endorsement of anyone else's policies. It's at times of conflict and tension that diplomacy can be most useful and vital to maintain all communication links.
OK, we have that point. Let me go back then to Noeleen. Noeleen, your view on that what we are doing, what David is saying is that if we do this, what we effectively do is poke in the eye the people whom we are trying to persuade.
I think that's probably one of the most hypocritical things I've heard in a long time. There was no issue with flying the Ukrainian flag, and rightly so, because of the illegal invasion by Russia. That is exactly what has happened in Palestine for decades. I'm sorry if the Israelis have an issue with the Irish stance on what they're doing in Palestine. Well, that's a problem for them. That doesn't mean we need to stay quiet and allow it to happen.
Well, Noeleen, we got a text to say the Palestinians support Hamas, or rather a majority of Palestinians support Hamas, a terrorist organisation. By putting a flag atop an Irish building, we're giving the nod to Hamas over the absolutely horrendous thing that they did on October the 7th.
I don't agree with that. I don't think the vast majority of Palestinians support Hamas at all. They're only in control of one part of that. And I think that's an unfair statement to make. People in Palestine want to live their lives in peace, and that hasn't been happening for a very long time.
In relation to the interpretation of it by the Israelis or people in Israel, David, the reality is that we are now nearly a month away from what occurred on October the 7th, and what is ongoing is what's happening in Palestine. Is it not therefore incumbent on us to take a stance on the present, regardless of what happened a month ago?
I think we would all agree, Anton, that the conflict is exceptionally complicated. And every statement, every flag you put up, every diplomatic message, timing is crucial, and you have to be exceptionally careful as to how these are interpreted or misinterpreted. The focus needs to be to bring both sides to the table for an urgent ceasefire, and focus on getting humanitarian access and supplies to civilians who are unfortunately suffering.
Is that a bit Jesuitical in a context where we have an Israeli cabinet minister giving the Cromwell version of Hell or Connacht, saying they can go, the Palestinian population can go to the desert or Ireland? I would have thought in that context, whether or not we put up a Palestinian flag over an Irish building is relatively minor, no?
All of these messages have an impact. And at a very sensitive, intense time in a conflict, when you're trying to bring both sides to the table, flying the flag of one nation is not the best way to go about it. I understand it's a very emotional issue, but it's at times when you see these things happening on our TV screens, you have to take a step back and reflect and ask, if we're focused on getting a peaceful solution for both sides, putting up one nation's flag is not the way to go about it.
Your own party leader at the weekend came out and said it was akin to revenge. Now, if that's not emotive language, I don't know what is. And he was right.
OK, that is where we will leave it. Thank you both very much. That is Noeleen Reilly, who is independent councillor for Ballymun-Finglas, and David McManus, who is Fine Gael councillor for Dunleary, Rathdown, or rather, I should say, for Rathfarnham, Templeogue in the South County Council area.